Hey, this is Derek Murphy. Welcome to day 3. We're going to be talking about basically publishing a book. And there's only a couple things you actually need to do with book publishing, and most of it is book design. So it's the interior, it's the cover, it's that full wrap cover. And that can be difficult to do yourself, but it is possible. I do have DIY book covers, which is a site I put up a long time ago. I put up a lot of YouTube videos which have something, not quite 2 million views, but it's getting up there. And it's kind of this dual-edged sword, because on the one hand, cover design can be really expensive. You don't want to screw it up. Even if you're paying for an expensive designer, it's very possible that they will get it all wrong, especially if you're the one calling the shots. That's kind of one of the biggest dangers in self-publishing, is that if you're hiring out services, you will make your own decisions. And if this is your first book and the first time you've designed a book, you probably shouldn't be responsible for some of those design decisions. But the main important thing is that you have to package and position your book to appeal to your readers. So we talked before about how you have to know your audience. You have to know what they are, who they are, what they want. And you have to make your book immediately communicate the genre and the benefits, and be attractive to the right audience, to the right readers. If you have written your book and you're trying to do it yourself, the mistake most authors make is that they try to focus on the details. They try to get all the details that are covered to match the story. And that's a mistake. I used to say that the cover's job is to sell the book, its only job. That's not actually true. The cover's job is just to get them to read the blurb. They're probably only ever going to see your cover. It's going to be really small as a thumbnail. And if they don't click on it, they're never going to read your blurb. They're never going to know what your book is even about. So the cover really is like 75% of your marketing budget. And while it's possible to do it yourself, and sometimes, like for a lot of people, if you haven't written a book to market, if you haven't written a book that people are going to enjoy, it's probably a mistake to spend a lot of money on an expensive cover, because you don't know if it's going to sell yet. On the other hand, starting off with a crappy homemade cover is a quick way to failure if you don't have a quality, good enough book cover. There's kind of like a passing grade. If it's good enough, it communicates a genre, it's fine, and it's possible to do that by yourself as long as you know what you're doing and you learn enough about your market and the other covers that are performing well in your categories. But if you don't do that and you're just throwing paint at the wall, there are two big disadvantages. One, you're going to get everything wrong. It's not going to be attractive to your audience. They're not even going to know it's for them. So I see a lot of authors saying stuff like, I hate, everybody in my genre does this, and I hate covers like that. I want my cover to be different and unique and stand out. That's not what a cover is for. That's not what a cover does. There's also a huge difference between the traditionally published books whose main market is bookstores, and they don't actually sell very well online, mostly because of their cover design choices, and the indie authors, who on the one hand, a lot of indie authors actually have better quality design because they're a lot stronger, brighter, more colorful. There's a lot of really high quality book cover designers and book design resources that are available now that weren't available a couple years ago. So the design standard, especially for some genres like fantasy or urban fantasy, they've improved so much the last couple years. You can't really get away with a mediocre cover anymore to an extent. On the other hand, I've also seen like a lot of the really big covers, a lot of the big successful authors, they don't have a huge budget for cover design because they've learned where to cut costs. So they know how to get high quality cover design work for less, which means unfortunately that in the top 100 of Amazon, a lot of the really successful self-publishing authors, their covers aren't actually that good. They're not so well designed, but they do very successfully hit all the genre design considerations. So for example, in Magical Academy, which is a popular genre right now, there are certain motifs you need on your cover. It's a girl in a uniform, it's a big mansion in the background, there's a little bit of magic. You symbolize magic with like a fire around the hand or fire around a weapon, even if that's not exactly how the magical system in your universe works. You don't want to focus too much on the details because readers aren't gonna recognize those details yet anyway. The people who are looking at your covers, they haven't read the book yet. They don't know what the details are for your book, and they're probably not going to go back later and be like, oh, this book's inside doesn't match the outside. You want it to kind of be close enough, but don't get distracted by the details, because it's always better to use a strong cover that sells as opposed to an accurate cover that has the details right, which is why most of the time I will buy pre-made covers, because if I can buy a pre-made cover, I know it's going to sell. Like whatever I write, it's going to sell because the cover is great. And I don't have to spend a week futzing around with Photoshop, which is the other big disadvantage if you design your own covers. I make this mistake still, and I'm a professional designer, where I'll spend a week on a cover and then I realize I didn't hit the market the right way and I redo it all, and then I've spent weeks and weeks of my time. I could have been writing a new book, and instead of playing around with Photoshop, recently I've been playing around with like DAZ 3D, which is a whole new software and program. It's probably not worth your time unless you want to be a cover designer, or unless you're publishing, dozens of books, lots of long series. It can be helpful to have a basis of Photoshop, or at least some design tools, so you can do some of your own graphic design work. On the other hand, it's usually the place you want to outsource, because it really matters, and you can find a designer to, you can get 3 photographs and send it to someone on Fiverr.com and say, mash these up together to turn it into art, and then do the text well enough. The background art is about the emotion, the text communicates the genre, so getting the text right is really important. I see a lot of high quality illustrators with amazing art and really sloppy text, really unprofessional text. And like I said, that's okay, as long as it hits the genre hard and it's clear what the book is and where it fits. You can get away with substandard design. On the other hand, if you have a great book and you're really hitting the market hard, getting a mediocre cover to an amazing cover, like if you can get up into that top bracket where your cover is so good, they're going to buy the book because of the cover. They don't even have to read the blurb. The cover's so amazing, they're just going to buy it. That's pretty difficult to do, and you may need to hire a better quality designer, but it is sometimes worth doing as long as you have a book that's written to market, you have a really tight blurb, you know that you've got your marketing and your positioning done well. Once you're already doing everything right, a better cover, if you shift your conversion from like 20% to 30%, that can make a really big difference. So cover design is important, but what I try to focus on is just making it good enough, because the vast majority of authors, they don't even have passably acceptable book covers. You look at the book cover and you just know it's terrible, it's unprofessional, it's unattractive. Not only does it not attract the right audience, but it actively turns them off because it looks bad. People do judge books by the quality of the cover, and if your book looks bad, they're not going to buy it. If it kind of ticks most of the boxes, even if it looks kind of bad, but they get that it's the kind of book they like to read, it can be okay. And even in some categories, the design standards aren't as high, so you can get away with, for example, thriller and mystery. It's a much easier to cover to design because there's no magic. So there's basically one background landscape and one character. You still need to make it clean, but as long as you have the right colors and the right fonts, you can make a pretty decent cover pretty fast. And unfortunately, the majority of people who ask me, my book is published, I don't have any reviews, I can't sell it, advertising doesn't work, nothing works, I give up. Almost always it's a cover problem, and you can fix covers pretty easily as long as you know what you're doing. And the problem is a lot of people will hire a designer, but then tell them what they want. And if a designer doesn't know what they're doing, some designers are really good at the Photoshop, but they're not good at the fonts or the text, or vice versa. If they don't really know what they're doing, or if they just don't have the confidence. One of the things I say on my book cover design site is that the reason I charge more than anybody else is because I won't make what you want, because you don't know what you're talking about. I will make you a cover that's going to sell your book to your audience, and that's actually what you need. That's you don't want to get distracted by cover design, because that's not your product. Your product is the book. You want your book to sell. You want people to read the book. The cover is just packaging, so don't get too distracted or worried about it, but make sure that you get it right. So I do have a course on cover design and some templates that's well worth the cost, even if you hire a designer, because if you don't know what you're doing, you may fight with a designer trying to get all the details right. You'll probably drive them crazy. They're going to give up or stop working for you at some point. I offer unlimited revisions, but at some point, that's not actually good for the authors, because what happens is my first draft will be here's a great cover that's going to sell. And then we'll get further and further in the weeds as the author picks apart the details and they try all this, let me try this and let me see that. And it gets further and further away from a strong cover that I'm comfortable even putting in my portfolio. That's actually a disservice to the author, which is why I'm going to be rebranding soon to a cheaper book cover design package where we just don't allow you as much revision because that's not really good for anybody. And we'll just say, like, we will make you a cover that's going to sell. If you don't like it, we'll refund you and we'll put it in our pre-made gallery. But you don't want, like, as an author, you don't want to be spending your time, even though it's important, even though you have to get it right, you don't want to be spending or wasting your time playing around with stuff. You just want to figure out what works. You want to study your market. You want to find a template and just use it. Generally, nonfiction covers are a lot easier. It's just clean and simple, serif or sans serif fonts, depending on the genre, possibly one background color, and then generally one item or object, sometimes with a little clever font replacement, which is where you substitute one letter with something else, a little object or something. They're not necessarily hard to do, but they're still important to get right. With nonfiction book covers, it's actually more important just to focus on the keywords and the benefits in the subtitle, because that's really the main thing people are reading nonfiction for. And there are advantages or tricks with whether you do like a key stuffed subtitle with all the keywords, or just a really clever, witty, short subtitle that like summarizes everything. So like the bigger your audience is, the bigger your reach is, the less you need to do any kind of, the less you need to rely on SEO, which just means if people are searching for your stuff, it's a huge advantage if your book shows up first. And that's a lot of the stuff I talk about in Guerrilla Publishing, is just how to make your book show up when people are looking for books. If you can do that right, since a lot of people don't do it right, you can get ahead of everybody without paying for it. That's a really easy and effective hack. But on the other hand, if you already have a huge platform and you're not really worried about, the visibility, then you might be able to get away with a shorter, clever subtitle that doesn't have as many keywords. Anyway, I'm actually going to stop this video here, I think, because I'm losing the light. We have this amazing view. I'll stand up and show it to you. This is where I like to just stand in the evenings and look out over the landscape and survey my domain. But so this is book 3 in this process, which is packaging, and it is difficult to do it all yourself. I do have, if you opt in at the DIY book cover site or somewhere in the Guerrilla Publishing free resources and materials, I'll have a link to my favorite book cover designers and where to find the best stock images. Also, you need to be really careful about the stock images you use on your book cover, because there are a lot of rules. You can't just pick stuff up on Google and use it for your cover. You have to be really aware of what can get you in trouble later, because it's not worth the risk of using an image and getting in trouble for it later, or even just having to review. I have a friend who hired a designer and had an amazing book cover made, a beautiful book cover, but then that designer got called out because she had used some resources that weren't actually available for commercial use. So she had to rebrand her series and make a new cover and hire a new designer after she'd already launched. So that's some of the trouble I'm trying to save you from. You should definitely watch my videos about book cover design on YouTube, or the DIY book covers course, which goes into a little more detail. If you actually want to make your own covers in Microsoft Word or in Photoshop, I kind of walk you through that process and show you how to make different covers in all the main genres. I'm also going to start focusing on a pre-made cover site. So I'm not really doing book cover design anymore, but I do still enjoy it. It's kind of a nice break for writers. So instead of doing custom client work, what I'm going to start doing is just basically doing how-to tutorials and then putting those covers up for sale in my pre-made gallery. And I think in the Guerrilla Publishing program, like at the higher levels, you'll get access to one of those pre-mades or possibly a custom cover if I still want to offer that. I'm not sure if I'm really even going to do that anymore, because like I said, I really want to be focusing on my own writing. However, I do know that the cover is so important, and this is kind of one of the main skill sets that I have is cover design. So I do want to make sure I'm still helping people overcome that one crucial hurdle, because if you screw up your cover design, none of your marketing is going to work. None of the visibility stuff I'm going to talk about in the next video is going to work if you don't have the cover right. So even if you hire someone or if you do it yourself, you really do need to learn the basics of book cover design to make sure you're not making the critical mistakes that are going to sabotage your sales. Tomorrow we're going to talk more about what people are mostly interested about, which is the marketing. How do you actually get your book in front of people for less money than you spend so that your book can be profitable right away? Thanks. I hope this was useful. Bye-bye.